Please open to page 168 in your student journal. We're going to continue looking at the properties of exponents today in lesson 6.1. And I know some of you might be thinking, Miss Golly, we already did this page on the first day of 6.1. But I want us to look at part B, and I want us to look at part 4. We did not do part 4 the other day. So I just want to see what happens in part 4. I want to start by expanding out. So 3 to the 4th power means 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. And then in the denominator we have the same thing. Now last time we talked and said, well, when we have 3 divided by 3, we get 1. We can go through and we can simplify after we expand out. Now I know a lot of us are looking at this thinking, okay, Miss Golly, everything, I know we like to use the phrase cancels out, so we have nothing left, so it should be a 0. That's not the case. We're dividing, so 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So we don't have a 0. These things don't cancel out. They just all simplify down to 1. So we really have 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, which just comes down to being 1. So these things do not cancel out when we divide. They simplify to a 1. Now, if we use our exponent property, little refresher, when we divide and we have the same base, we keep that base the same and we subtract the exponents. 4 minus 4, we end up with a 0, 3 to the 0 power. Now I know some of you are thinking, oh, so it just must mean 0. When we expand it out though, we got a 1. So 3 to the 0 power is 1. And actually, let's go ahead and turn to page 170 in our student journal. And let's actually look at our property when we have 0 for an exponent. A to the 0 power, so that means any number to the 0 power, equals 1. We just saw that. We expanded out and we saw the result was 1. Everything simplified down to 1. So if we have 4 to the 0 power, we get 1. We have any variable, any number to the 0 power, we get 1. Let me even show you on the calculator. If you're still not believing me, let's do 4 to the 0 power. And the result is 1. So any number at all, any number, any variable to the power of 0, the result's 1. The second property I want to talk to you about today is what we do when we have negative exponents. We had a question on a quiz that had y to the 2nd power over y to the 3rd power, or something very close to that. If we do our exponent property, we get y to the 2 minus 3. We get y to the negative 1st. And that's how I had you guys leave that on your progress check that you had. Now we need to figure out, though, how we can rewrite that so it has a positive exponent. So I want to try expanding out and doing a little simplifying. So y to the 2nd power, y times y to the 3rd, y times y times y. These two y's will simplify to 1. Those two y's will simplify to 1. Now remember, the numerator is not empty. I'm not going to put a 0 there. Those simplify to a 1. And then I have just a plain old y left in my denominator. So if I do my exponent property, I end up with y to the negative 1st. If I expand out, I end up with 1 over y. So anytime you have a negative exponent in the numerator, you need to switch it to the denominator to make it positive. Same would go if we have a negative exponent in the denominator, we would flip it switch it up to the numerator to make it positive. We want to make sure our final answer has all positive exponents. Let's try out a few examples using our zero and our negative exponents. Let's turn to page 172 in our student journals, and let's see if we can maybe bring a few of these things together. If we look at example 1, example 1 is even something, if you wanted to, you could put 3 to the 0 power in your calculator. That's fine. I know we see a 0 in the exponent. I know we're really tempted. We really want to put 0 in there. But anything to the 0 power is 1. Anything to the 0 power is 1. If we take a look at example 4, just getting a little more familiar with the negative exponents. Whenever you have a negative exponent in the numerator, remember we could put this over 1, we have to move it to the denominator to make it a positive exponent. Then our numerator is not empty, we're going to put a 1 there. Now you want to make sure also that you simplify. If you have a numerical base, if you have a number for your base, make sure you finish simplifying. And you can use your calculator to do that. -4 to the 3rd power, go ahead and use your calculator for that, and you'll find it's -64. Example number 5 brings in both of our properties. 2 to the -3rd power is in the numerator. If I have a negative exponent in the numerator, I need to move it to the denominator so the exponent becomes positive, and only the exponent changes sign. Then I look in the denominator and I have a 5 to the 0 power. 5 to the 0 power really becomes 1. My numerator is not empty. I put a 1 in there. Anything times 1, multiplying by 1 doesn't change anything. So I end up with 1 over 2 to the 3rd is 8. Just want to do just a couple more examples with you. We're just going to finish up with 2 examples. I want to look at number 11. The number 11, we have to be very careful. The 6 really does have an exponent, and it's a positive 1. If we have a positive exponent, that number stays right where it's at. So that 6 is going to stay in my numerator. A to the 0 power, that just equals 1. If you want to go ahead and cross that out, you can. It's just a 1. B to the -2nd power, I need it to become a positive 2, so I'm going to move it down to the denominator. Positive exponents stay put. Negative exponents, they need to move. One more example, then I want to make sure you guys have a little time for your progress check and ask some questions. Let's look at number 14. I'm going to start in the numerator. I have 2 to the +3rd power, so that's going to stay in the numerator. A to the -3rd power, that's negative in the numerator, so I'm going to move it to the denominator to make it positive. 2 to the 3rd had a positive exponent, so it stayed in the numerator. A to the -3rd, negative, so we had to move it to the denominator. Now as I look to the denominator, I have 8 to the -1st. It has a negative exponent, so I need to move it up to the numerator. B to the -5th, negative exponent in the denominator, so down in the bottom, so I need to move it up to the numerator. C to the 0 is just 1. I just like to cross those out. It just equals 1. 2 to the 3rd power is 8. 8 to the 1st power is 8. Eight times 8 is 64. the b to the fifth just stays, and a to the third just stays. Now you might come across where some of our properties from the first part of this section come into play also with the negative exponents, and that's okay. We still handle all our properties the same way. Our final answer, we have to make sure, has all positive exponents. So now what I'd like you to do this time is go ahead and try out your progress check. Use all of our notes we just took on the progress check also,